we welcome you, the Guardians of Martin County welcome you to this meeting. We thought it would be a timely meeting for two reasons. One is, retrospectively, we wanted to demonstrate how effective we have been. Now, I admit this is a discreet audience and possibly we're speaking to the converted already, but the fact of the matter is that we pride ourselves on spending your money wisely. And I think when you see the ad campaigns that we have mounted against the train and also in favor of clean water, you will very easily and clearly understand that it took a significant amount of expertise, coordination, and professionalism to make these things happen. And I am very grateful as president of the Guardians to thank everyone who has contributed in that fashion. So with those preliminary remarks, I'm going to turn the podium over to Merrill Snyder. Thank you.
Okay, here comes the ad guy, I guess, is the answer to that. You know, just to start, what I'd like to say is just sit there for a minute and think about, why is it that you really love Martin County? Can you think of that in words? Can you think of that in pictures? Is it a single word? Is it a statement? I'm a word guy, and I find it's very difficult to capture Martin County in words, particularly a short list of words, which is, you know, really what you want when you're trying to come up with a slogan of some sort. An image, I think, is much better. And this really is not just pretty. This is what Martin County is all about, as far as I'm concerned, the natural beauty of Martin County. And this is not just peaceful. This is what Martin County is all about. We have beaches where you don't stumble over bodies while you're going from one place to another, and you're not operating in the shadow of a high-rise. And this is not just pure joy. This is life in Martin County. This is what our quality of life looks like when you do it with an image as opposed to words. Now, our job as the Guardians of Martin County is to protect that quality of life. That's what we're all about. We do that by informing and educating the public about potential threats to that quality of life that we just saw in those three pictures. And media, or what you call public communications, is really our primary weapon in doing that. And the communications here are a little different than they might be in a normal organization because we're all volunteers. So our money in communications all goes into getting messages out, not into paying people to create messages. And that's a very important distinction. In 2016, we faced two primary threats. One was All Aboard Florida, which I think everybody knows about, the 32 trains that are going to roar through our communities and pretty much wreck everything if they have their own way. And the second thing, of course, happened in the spring and the summer this year, where the toxic algae bloom came back with a vengeance. I think, if anything, it was probably even worse than it was in 2013. It absolutely mucked up the entire Treasure Coast. Let me start with All Aboard Florida. All Aboard Florida is something we've been fighting for several years already, along with Brent Hanlon and his group and a lot of other people. And believe me, it's a war, not a battle, and therefore it's going to go on for a lot longer. We've just barely begun, even if they don't think so. In 2016, the important thing was that All Aboard Florida worked very hard to try to convince us that this thing was already over, that it was a done deal, that they were unstoppable, that they were inevitable, and they wanted us all to give up. In fact, they did a very good job on the media here in Stewart. They converted our good friend Rich Campbell over at the Stewart News, who was a staunch opponent when he first started. The next thing I know, he's running editorials that say we ought to give up, we ought to surrender, we ought to wave the white flag. I took that rather personally, by the way. I sent him a letter to the editor, which took him to task. I said, where do you get off saying that we ought to wave the white flag, and we ought to do it right now? And the commissioners ought to stop spending money behind that whole thing. I said, can you imagine if Winston Churchill had decided that the other guys simply had too many bombs? Where would we be then if the guy gave up like that? His motto was never give up, and that's what Rich Campbell should have been doing. In any event, we took that thrust and said our goal is kind of to counter this whole feeling that this is a done deal. We wanted to try to break that feeling that people had that that was a done deal. So we set out to do that. We used social media, we used email blasts, and we used some ads in local newspapers like the Stewart News. to do all of that. And we did these ads, by the way, some were for the Citizens Against the Train, but we also used them for the Guardians of Martin County. Just by changing the signature at the bottom, we were able to use all of that for both parties, and they reach somewhat different audiences, so that's very important. I'm going to take you through 4 out of the bunch that we did. We did a continuous run. Here was number 1. We salute the Army Corps of Engineers. Why would we salute them? We salute them because they refused to issue a permit to All Aboard Florida, which we thought was very praiseworthy. That was a good thing as far as we were concerned. They didn't feel they got enough information about the potential damage to the environment that they were going to do, so they sent them back and said, if you want a permit, you're going to have to start over again. We thought that was great. The important thing about this was we did this in connection with a letter writing campaign from our citizens. We set it up so we had 4 prepared letters that you could choose from. You simply went there, clicked on that, picked the letter you like, put your name on it, and sent it. That was the starting point. We did it with emails. Coming out of that, Len Susi and Chris Adams invented a way to do it with hard copy. So we managed to get a whole bunch of hard copies, and at the end of the day, we sent a couple of thousand emails, at least that much, wasn't it, Chris? A couple of thousand emails to the Army Corps praising them for the work that they had done on our behalf. The second thing that we came up with was, we call this the All Aboard Florida shell game. All Aboard Florida came out and they said, we have created a shell car in California, and they made a lot of noise about this, almost as if this thing was going to be running the following week up the tracks to join us. It was simply a prototype car that they put out there, but they wanted you to think that that's how close they were to the finish line. Again, they wanted you to believe it was a done deal. We said, no, that's not true. What this is really strictly a distraction. This is a trick. They're going to fool you the same way the guys up in New York City fool you with their fold-up tables when they get you to try to find the pea underneath the shell. Just before the cops run in and try to arrest them, they take off. But that's what we thought was really going on here. They were just trying to make you believe that it was a done deal. And everything that they did, we said, that's not what happens. The third one, this is a very important one. The judge rules against All Aboard Florida. 3 months earlier, the same federal judge had ruled against the counties and in favor of All Aboard Florida. He said the counties don't have any standing. And what that meant was that the counties were not going to be allowed to challenge the environmental studies that they had done because they didn't have standing in the court. He came back on appeal 3 months later and said he now agreed that we did have standing in the counties and the counties could proceed to take it to court and challenge the environmental studies that they had. That was a big breakthrough because that suddenly put the All Aboard Florida folks on the defensive. They were going to have to defend themselves for this. The last one I'm going to show you, and this was All Aboard Florida is coming undone. This is the undeal that was coming undone, and it's disintegrating right before your very eyes. And this was very important because by this time, when they were coming undone, they hadn't been able to sell bond number 1. They had $1.75 billion worth of bonds that they wanted to get rid of. They couldn't sell any. They didn't have any money, therefore, to proceed past West Palm Beach, so they could only really work between Miami and West Palm Beach. So they were restricted by their own lack of funds. Thirdly, now the counties were allowed to challenge the environmental studies that had been done, so they were at risk on that. And fourth, what came out through the Bloomberg News was there was a rumor, at least, if not more, that the parent company, Fortress Investments, was going to sell the freight trains. Well, if they sell the freight trains, they're probably going to have to sell the tracks with them. I don't think anybody wants the trains and not the tracks. Where does that leave these guys? Because they got to run on those tracks. So if they belong to somebody else, they're probably going to have to pay their way to get back on those tracks. Anyway, at that point in time, we thought we had them pretty well on the run, at least a little bit. We had kind of deflated this whole idea that this was a done deal. They'd run into a lot of problems over this period of time. We think we had also maybe made the media feel like their call for surrender was a little premature, and that was good. And lastly, they had accused the county of wasting taxpayer dollars, and now it began to look like the taxpayers' expenses were beginning to pay off. So now what I'm going to do is let Chris tell you about, this is what we did, okay? Now, how did that work with our supporters out there when we did all these things?
Thank you, Merrill. Good afternoon. I'll be talking a little bit about how social media works, and I'm going to give you a short tutorial on Facebook, because I think I was here last year, and we're going to have another test. The two problems we have faced is the lack of public awareness about All Aboard Florida. Even a year ago, I would meet people that still did not know that the train was coming. And 3 weeks ago, one of my neighbors said, "Isn't that glad that it's all over with the train?" So we have to continue to build public awareness and to offset misinformation about this project. In Google Analytics, your demographics are interesting, and this is difficult to read on this slide, but 35% of the people on the Treasure Coast are, a surprise, over 65 years of age. And social media really thrives on millennials. So when you think what the Guardians accomplished with this demographics, it's astonishing. Our followers increased 50% in 2016. Facebook likes rose from 6,000 to 9,000. The CAT website was viewed by 36,000 people, and the CAT YouTube channel had 125,000 views. So there was significant rise in readership and viewership and awareness. 4,000 people signed up to get newsletters so that we can keep them apprised of what's changing. 80% are new visitors, very important. We don't want to keep teaching to the same band. And 57% are male, and that figure goes back and forth, but women are very participatory on social media. We also needed to reach out to more than just Martin County. Miami has gotten more engaged. They're up by 85%. This is Google Analytics view they give on a computer showing the isthmus or the peninsula of Florida, and that big blue bubble at the bottom is Miami. Until last year, they were last on statistics. This year, they were first. So I guess people in Miami might not like the train either. So here's your short tutorial. How many people have a Facebook page in here? Raise your hands. Okay. And how many people only use it for their grandchildren? Okay, just checking. So this tutorial is to explain the high exponential nature of social media. Personal and profile pages are different, but we're going to talk about them in the same fashion. Personal pages like yours with your family and your grandchildren are measured with the number of friends you have. Business pages are measured with the number of likes. It's a little more complex than that, but for our purposes, we're going to think of them as the same. So this is my profile. I have almost 3,000 friends in spite of trying to carefully stay off Facebook. But I'm in the business, so the name gets out. But I don't go on Facebook and say, I just made cookies, I'm going to bed. I really avoid it, and I still have 3,000 friends. But that's where you would find your friends. On your profile, you can look up the number. Everything you share is collected here. Two other pages you should look at. On your timeline, you can see what you have posted and what friends have tagged you with. Tagging just means if Peter Conze has a page and someone says @Peter Conze in their post, it'll automatically show up on this page. So it's two things on that page. And the last page is this one. If you click on home next to your name, you will see what your friends post. So here's how it gets exponential. If one of your grandchildren posts a picture of one of your children posts a picture of your grandchild, it shows up in your feed and in your friends' feed. And if your friends have 500 friends, and assuming you're friends with your children, this image could possibly be seen by 500 people. If your daughter who posted it has 500 friends, the picture could be seen by the first 500, and if just 5% share it, and they have 500 friends, the picture can be seen by thousands. So it's, in some of you, are quite active, and some of you may not be. The funnier the post is, the more viral it becomes, which viral simply means somebody else is sharing it, not you posting it. The second thing that works is if the post demonstrates any type of threat or is disconcerting. Those are the two things that, you know, people get feeling and emotion about, happiness and fear, and that's what works on social media. And social media works because it makes people feel good. So our model is a business page. We support and promote all the entities that are fighting the train. If Brent posts something on CARE, if Casey at Florida Not All Aboard, if the county, so we're constantly pushing out the story. Here's a recent one with the CARE informational meeting, which was very good if any of you attended at the Lyric Theater in Stewart. And here's a familiar face, our Brent Hanlon, champion for the cause against the train. So we make hundreds of posts every year. Some are free, because we post all the news articles, meetings, and announcements. And carefully selected topics, the ones that are happy or funny, the ones that we think are worth putting your donation dollars behind, we purchase from Facebook, and they have an excellent program for getting the word out. We can sort by voting district, we can sort by zip code, we can sort by location, we can sort by miles away from us, we can sort by interests. So we can actually put that ad right in front of very specific people, very specific interests. And we respond personally, the staff that we hire, we respond personally to thousands, every single comment that comes on the Facebook page. So here's an example of just a page and where all the arrows are, the red arrows, that is a response from someone on the staff. Here's the happy example that Merrill just mentioned on that 5,000 people took action on the page. 3,000 people shared it. Now just relate that to how many people share the grandchildren. That means, this was the judge rules against All Aboard Florida, and there are some new developments maybe that Brent or Mike could talk about this afternoon. You know that Martin County and St. Lucie filed to block the $1.7 billion lawsuit. Judge Cooper allowed it to have standing, and All Aboard Florida has now withdrawn that and asked for a dismissal of that lawsuit, and they plan, we understand, to kind of take it off in little bites, maybe just go 600 million at a time. So I believe there was, as we were on the way here, a new development that maybe one of the two of you could speak about when we finish our remarks. So this was a happy example. And what we know, because there's a lot of hype about statistics on Facebook, but I can actually see that 30% of the cat fans were online and they reacted to the post. And if 30% shared with and share again, they have 100 friends. You're looking at a reach of 100,000, and in this case, the reach was 189,000. And I think we spent somewhere around $3,000 to get that reach, and targeted right to our audience. Pretty good. Now, you think that's good, 189,000. Did anybody read the New York Times article about Logan Paul? He has 14 million likes. He has 4 billion loops. That means 4 billion times his videos have been played on Vine. Vine is like a short version of YouTube. The videos are 6 seconds. This is him. He made his name by doing splits all over the country and in New York. Here's a split on the subway. Here's one on the streets of New York. Here's one in Paris. And he does them right in front of people. This is Tokyo, and this is Beijing. And this vlog, which is a video blog, had 1,200,000 views. He does it right in front of people. If you watch these, the people are just horrified. He waits till they come along and he goes like this. And he put this out. He's now making $500 an hour just doing ads for people because he's so successful. He did it using social media. Problem is, he's a millennial. And that's what we've come to. I have them on staff. They are brilliant. They are ethereal. And they're highly, highly opposed to coming to work on time. We had to have a discussion that, when we go to a meeting, that means we're at the meeting with our coffee, the car's parked, we're in our chair, When a meeting starts, it starts at 10. And they said, oh, we can't do that. And I said, well, that's fine. And they said, oh, whew. I said, I'll find people to replace you that can. So they're wonderful, but it's a whole new world out there. We don't have those demographics. So what has occurred with the Guardians is even more phenomenal. Here's another one. I'll show you the second post here. In September, when All Aboard, there was a short article about All Aboard Florida ignoring the westerly corridor. And this was one that shows consternation. It also had high rankings. 78,000 people viewed it. 3,400 liked it, loved it, clicked on it, made a comment. 400 people wrote comments. And that really helps us, saves us work, because we don't have to get in the fray to create energy. So here's a gentleman well named Harold Van Horn. He must like horns. He writes, I support the trains. To be successful, they have to go where people live. I ride the trains in the Northeast in Europe. They are great. So young woman writes back, Jennifer Snyder Price says, but they're not going to stop. This other person writes, go back to the Northeast, Harold. Or better yet, Europe. Chuck writes, Europe and Brightline, not a contest, lame thinking, Harold. So this kind of action is that dialogue, if you ever want to choose to dial into the page when we do a large post, it's pretty hysterical. Here is someone that really had it pretty well. All Aboard Florida has always been all about freight. The service was to be a funding plan to finance the upgraded construction for the FEC tracks. However, even with all of the political help and millions funded by our governor, the project is floundering and is still not done. The passenger service was never able to obtain funding from the FDOT except for $1.75 billion in PAB, which has been suspended. And he goes on actually to sum up the whole thing pretty well. So what you've seen in 3 years has changed from what train? What do you mean? Who's All Aboard Florida? We have people now coming on the page, and this has tremendous, tremendous communication and political clout. It's absolutely necessary to win this. Here's a thank you to Christopher Heath. We purposely use on when we fund something, either something that's really funny, like Logan Paul, or we'll use something that causes consternation. This should cause consternation if you know anything about, say, an LNG vessel that gets burst, or any type of propane or liquid fuel. So 111,000 people were reached, 12,000 shared, 2,300 people took action, and 200 people wrote comments on the post. Merrill talked a little bit about how good we are with funding. We're actually quite Scottish with your donations. This, you barely can see, is not a whale. This is how carefully we can look at the statistics, and it shows when people are on the Facebook page, and that's when we post. We just don't get up in the morning and put it out at 8. If the most people are on at 8:30 at night, that's when we put the post on, and it's effective. So here for this group is 7 to 9 p.m. The board and advisors are volunteer. Much of the social media work has been donated. We use local vendors as needed, and thanks to you, the Guardians have been successful. 3 years ago, I said we will not win this war without a large social media presence. We are the social media leader on the Treasure Coast. We will use that effort to support everybody that's fighting the train. It is successfully increasing public awareness and educating residents to every move. And we've woken up a sleeping giant, a much more active social media population on the Treasure Coast. So in spite of the demographics, good job, guys. Keep writing to those grandchildren and learning how to use Facebook. Thank you very much.
Just to complete the loop, we'll come back to the water that we haven't touched on yet, and what we did for that when the algae bloom crisis hit us in the spring and summer. The minute it hit, creating muck everywhere, lots of organizations put out all kinds of ads showing fancy ways of going through the map and moving different things south, which is what everybody wanted to do. What we decided to do was kind of focus on one particular individual that we thought was the person who could really make something happen if he had the political will to do it. which is questionable. That, of course, is our friend here. The first thing we did is Peter wrote a letter which was sent by certified mail to Governor Scott expressing our demand that he take action about this and do something about the muck that was all over the Treasure Coast. We followed that up by running this email blast and running it on social media, which really housed Peter's letter. His letter was right in there saying, you know, you got to step up to this state, to this plate. You got to find a water solution, not a water fix. Don't put a Band-Aid on it. We want you to come up with something that's going to get rid of this stuff, not just stop the discharges for the rest of the year. And we said to him, you want to go, let's get to work? Well, we say let's get to work at fixing and solving this water problem. That's what it's all about. So that was our first thing. The next thing we did was this: Governor, can you smell it now? This was important because every other politician, it seems, showed up, took a good look, took a good smell, and went away dismayed about this whole thing. And that included, you know, Senator Nelson, soon to be Senator again, Rubio, Joe Negron, all those people showed up. The governor declared a state of emergency, and then he disappeared from view. He went into hiding or something. You couldn't find him anyplace, so we invited him to come back. We said, you know, things may be fine up in Tallahassee, but down here it stinks. And we asked him to come back and smell for himself and see how he liked it. And we also said, again, we want a water solution, not a water fix in this situation, so you got to really help us out here. We said the scientists mostly weighed in, and they're all in agreement about what needs to be done. Amendment 1 says you've got the money to do it, so you just got to step up and try to make our water clean for good. And this was a letter writing campaign on the heels of Peter's letter going out. What we did was put a letter writing campaign as part of this and ask the residents to send their email letters up to Governor Scott. And we generated hundreds of letters and emails that went to Governor Scott on the heels of this. How has this all worked? Well, these numbers are a little bit smaller than what Chris had to show us, but this particular concept that went out, it did not get advertising to push people to our Facebook page or to anything else. It was therefore what we call organic, meaning it didn't have any extra push in there. And we still got to over 8,000 people just by posting this out there, all by itself. And in total, since we started January through November of this year, our Facebook likes on the Guardians of Martin County have gone up 65%, which is a pretty big increase. So we greatly enhanced our audience. Remember, we started out saying we've got to make awareness get larger among our population out there, and we've got a 65% increase on our Facebook likes over that period of time. Now, looking forward, the water thing's not going to go away. Of course, the train's not going away. We may have some algae bloom amnesia, which is what Eve Samples called it the other day, but it's coming back for sure. In fact, the elements are probably still sitting out there in many of our waterways. It's just going to reappear on clockwork next year. The first thing we've done is, thanks to J.L. Laughlin, our environmental scientist, we have developed a water position paper for the Guardians, a very strong stance, which he's going to take you through in just a minute, and it will be made public tomorrow. The second thing is we have a new approach that we're going to follow. This is not a new strategy. We're not going to say take the water somewhere else. As you'll see from Jay's presentation in a minute, we certainly want to do it pretty much the same way a lot of other folks are doing, but what we need is a new approach that tries to get everybody on the same page somehow. Right now, there's a lot of groups, and they're all arguing back and forth, and there's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons, and virtually nothing has happened. So we think we have a new way of approaching this, which we are developing now and will be putting in practice in 2017. And with that, I'd like to have Jay come up and tell us about our position on water.
Thank you, Merrill. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. The title of our water position paper is this: Florida's future water supply depends on improved surface water management. If I could say what it really means in 3 words, it would be buy the land. What land? Where? Why? The historic flow regime through South Florida, through the Everglades, all of the water flowed south from Lake Okeechobee. Now, very little of it goes south of Lake Okeechobee. Instead, it goes west down the Caloosahatchee and east down the St. Lucie rivers. The reason being the Everglades agricultural area was created and it forms a blockage south of Lake Okeechobee. Last summer, one of our latest projects on our webpage was asking people to please sign the Now or Never Glades Declaration, which the Guardians have signed, and I as a member have signed it as an individual, and you can too. The conclusion of this declaration is that water storage, treatment, and conveyance in the EAA, the Everglades agricultural area, is the best option to reduce the damaging releases to the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee estuaries. Development plans in the EAA threaten to change the region. The science is settled, the money's available, identify and secure the land, it's now or never. Last week when I made this, 35,800 people have signed the declaration. I checked today, 500 more have signed it. Social media works. Here's the Florida Oceanographic Society scientists signing it. Many other organizations have signed it, including the local Rivers Coalition, and up there on the upper right, some national conservation groups, many groups as well as individuals. The Rivers Coalition has a resolution. It is in support of Senator Negron's plan to purchase 60,000 acres south of Lake Okeechobee in the EAA. The Rivers Coalition represents 86 organizations. The Guardians is the 86th member, and has over 300,000 individual members. The position states that the region's economy has been sacrificed and functions as a dumping grounds of polluted Lake Okeechobee water for the benefit of areas south of the lake. So the coalition supports Senator Negron's plan to purchase the land to construct a large dynamic reservoir storage and reduce the damaging discharges, as well as restore historic flow to the Everglades, and urges all elected officials to support, fund, and implement the plan. Now, to the Guardian's position statement. I'm going to walk you through this and just hit the highlights in yellow. This position statement identifies a problem, describes policy issues associated with it, states the Guardian's position and its recommendations. First, the problem. 6 million people in the 3-county greater Miami area depend on freshwater supplies from the Biscayne aquifer and fresh water that recharges that aquifer to limit saltwater intrusion into it. Yet we are dumping hundreds of billions of gallons of fresh water per year wasted to tide via drainage canals that discharge excess Lake O water to the east and west. Just a few weeks ago in the Stewart News, the state's water demand may rise. We may have 15 million thirsty Floridians to arrive over the next several decades. And here's a new report on alternative patterns of water use. Here's another evidence that people care. The top 4 issues facing Florida, according to this public opinion survey, second only to economy and jobs, is environment. And in the environmental sphere, water-related problems far outstrip any other problem in people's view. Water is a very precious and scarce resource. Only 3% of the Earth's water is fresh water, and only 1/10 of that is available in lakes, rivers, or swamps. The other is underground or frozen. The Everglades, big swamp to the south of us, world famous, World Heritage Site, full of alligators, other interesting critters, and being humans, we have a proclivity to want to tame the wild and the wild lands. So Miss Florida riding the gator. Uncle Sam said to Miss Florida, a century and a half ago, in the middle of the 19th century, you may have the Florida Everglades if you drain and develop them. And we've done that. And this wonderful book called The Swamp traces the history and particularly the politics of the region at which Lake Okeechobee is right in the center. Here's the historic flow and current flow again. I like this map a little better because it shows the counties on there. Notice that the historic flow, no Lake Okeechobee water went down the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie rivers. Now they get the brunt of the excess Lake Okeechobee water because of the Everglades agricultural area. From 1991 to 2016, only 10% of the excess Lake Okeechobee water reached the Everglades protection area south of the Everglades agricultural area, which includes Everglades National Park. We've turned basically a swamp into a sugar bowl. Lake O discharges waste enormous amounts of water and affect the quality of life Floridians enjoy through devastating impacts, such as reduced salinity in the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee estuaries, extensive nutrient pollution from lake discharges that feed massive algae blooms, millions of pounds of sediment from the lake discharges that pollute the estuaries. This is the north end of the Hobe Sound National Wildlife Refuge. Some of that muck that Merrill was talking about. There it is, coming out of the St. Lucie and down the beach, headed for Hobe Sound Public Beach. Oh, that's where I live. I care about this. We got national exposure. New York Times, July this year. Reeking algae closes South Florida beaches. These Lake O discharges could prohibit saltwater intrusion into the Biscayne aquifer, but the fresh water isn't getting there, so there is no recharge from Lake O. Insufficient freshwater flow south of Lake O that triggers all kinds of problems. Vegetation changes, wildfires, hypersalinity in Florida Bay. So, the issues associated with the problem. The overarching issue is state acquisition of sufficient land in the EAA on which to construct additional storage, treatment, and conveyance of this excess water. There are 4 related sub-issues that I'm going to cover very briefly here. First, freshwater supply and demand. It may seem, because of the extensive rainfall that Florida gets, that water is abundant, but in some places the freshwater supply is already inadequate to meet the demands placed on it. Stormwater storage. To provide additional surface water for existing users and expected growth, Florida must move from a water drainage system to a water storage system. Storing rainfall, also called stormwater, would provide additional freshwater resources for aquifer recharge and water supply. For example, the average daily discharge of Lake O water being wasted to tide is equivalent to almost half of the daily freshwater demand in the greater Miami area. It's a huge waste. We need a reservoir in the EAA. Storing excess Lake O water in reservoirs all around the lake is consistent with findings from the University of Florida Water Institute study report. This study report found that even if all planned projects were completed, water storage and treatment capability around the lake will be insufficient to fix the problems associated with the discharges east and west. Fourth sub-issue, land acquisition for a reservoir in the EAA. The key to constructing the necessary additional water storage and treatment of Lake O excess water is state acquisition of land in the EAA that's owned by sugarcane producers. The viability of sugarcane farming is maintained with a complex system of dikes, canals, and pumps. This system keeps the EAA lands dry in the rainy season and irrigates them in the dry season, and taxpayers pay way more for this than do sugar producers. The sugar industry is in a position to transform Florida's water management approach by making it possible to store more stormwater south of the lake rather than wasting it to tide through drainage canals. This could avert a very real possibility of fundamental water supply crisis in South Florida. This would be paying forward part of the benefits that the sugar producers have garnered from not only EAA water management policies, but also the U.S. sugar program. This is a Farm Bill subsidy program that a brand new natural resource policy book that I co-authored, published this summer. I wrote in there about the sugar subsidies are not such a sweet deal. In August, Senator Joe Negron proposed as his top priority that the state acquire these lands in the EAA. And although funds to purchase the lands are available, the state of Florida has tended to side with the sugar industry's position on selling its lands in the EAA. And that position is no. Negron sees political challenges and possibilities with his proposal to buy the land, to store the water, and reduce the discharges. He's convinced there is no other way to do it. The critics, including the sugar industry, are not enthusiastic. Who is the sugar industry? Well, it's basically three organizations. By production, annual production, United States Sugar Corporation is the largest, Florida Crystals second, and then a conglomeration of about 50 or 60 different producers that have organized as the Sugarcane Growers Cooperative. Here's the idea that Senator Negron came up with that's backed by science, is that the current water flow, with lots of water going east and west, some of that water would go south and into a large reservoir in the middle of the Everglades agricultural area, and that would help restore then flowage to the south. When Senator Negron presented this, he trotted out a map, and on that map there were two circles. And either one of these areas just south of Lake Okeechobee would be sufficient to meet what the scientists say is necessary. And if you overlay those circles on a map of the Everglades land ownership, you see that Florida Crystals is heavily involved in one of the areas, United States Sugar Corp, in the other, the King Ranch, which is the largest member of the co-op. The Lake O Reservoir faces political hurdles and sugar industry pushback. The industry is balked at sacrificing its lands for a new reservoir. They say it'll cost agricultural jobs without delivering enough water to significantly help. Florida Crystal's vice president said, taking our lands is not going to solve Senator Negron's problem. The Sugarcane Cooperative said losing 60,000 acres means one of South Florida's 4 remaining sugar mills could close. Now to the Guardian's position. Guardian strongly supports state acquisition of the EAA lands to reduce the discharges and facilitate the movement of more water south, and we find adequate scientific support for so doing. There was a petition by 200 scientists who have worked in the Everglades area, and more importantly, the University of Florida Water Institute study report. Over there in Gatorland, they have put together this report. You can't see the title there, so I'll blow it up a little bit for you. It focuses specifically on how to reduce the discharges, and it was funded by the Florida State Senate and published in 2015. It's a review of the relevant plans and projects that are already on the books to move more water from Lake O to the Everglades. It's really the Bible on the science behind the issue. The review was stimulated in part by releases of the fresh water and their substantial negative ecological and economic impacts. The review team concluded that the solution is enormous increases in storage and treatment of water, both north and south of the lake, and both requiring significant long-term investment in water infrastructure. Substantial reduction in discharges will require additional land between the lake and the Everglades Protection Area, i.e. in the EAA. The Guardians believe that the following actions are in the best interest of all Floridians because they would provide additional freshwater storage for 6 million people in the greater Miami area, as well as moving more water south. Number 1, accelerate funding and completion of planned projects. Number 2, initiate additional efforts beyond the projects that are already planned and on the books. Number 3, The Guardians recommend that the state take the following actions as soon as possible. There are a number of them here. Perhaps the most important one is to identify the EAA land parcels by ownership and acreage that, if converted from sugarcane farming, would reduce LACO discharges. And of course, that would involve negotiating with the EAA landowners, which is number 5. First, ensure that the identified lands are going to meet the proposal of Senator Negron, which is backed by the University of Florida Science Report. 60,000 acres is only 15% of the lands that are cultivated for sugar farming. It is not going to put the industry out of business. And sixth and last, use the Amendment 1 funds to buy EAA lands. The money's there. Also in the position statement is a handy map, and it's 5 pages of text with 4 pages of endnote references. In the end, then, there are 3 estuaries that are being damaged, and there's one solution: buy the land. Thank you.
What we're trying to anticipate is the challenges we are all going to face, not just on Jupiter Island, not just in Martin County, as I said at the beginning, but also across the state. And I submit that we have all got to take a very active and proactive stance. We have to learn what the challenges are, we have to determine what the alternatives are for dealing with these challenges, and we have to try to collaboratively come to solutions. The Guardians are dedicated to stimulating that. There are a lot of politicians who are dedicated to doing what they would prefer to do, and oftentimes we find that these are in conflict. I can only say it is critically important to get engaged. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I appreciate your being here. We appreciate your support. And now let's celebrate one another and have something to drink. So.